on aliens. So it's actually awakening aliens
And the hidden history of the world.
So he says there's a different spin on it, so I'm looking forward to that. I've known Rick for, I think, 20 years. Pretty close to.
Must be at least.
And yeah, he's always got interesting things. He goes down to Monroe and Monroe Institute and learns and experiences and teaches, and then he comes home and shares it. And he just keeps growing, and we keep reaping the benefits. So I'm really pleased to have him here tonight. So it's 2 hours and 10 minutes. So we've decided that for tonight only, if you want a coffee and something to nibble, you can get up quietly during the presentation and come back to the back and get it, because it's going to be long, and then we can have question and answers, and we'll all fit it in so we can be up to by 10. Okay?
Okay.
Good.
Well, thank you for that. This PowerPoint presentation is called Awakening Aliens and the Hidden History of the World. And as Cheryl mentioned, my name is Rick Tilson from Moose Jaw, and this presentation kind of has 5 parts to it. The first part will be an explanation of reality, and I'm going to use the strict non-dualist model of reality because it is the KISS system. Keep it simple, sweetheart. The simplest system I have found. The second part will be an explanation of this reality. Then a definition, again using the simplest possible explanation of what is an alien. Then we will go into the pop culture stories of UFO alien-human interactions. And it will end with a kind of a summary or what all of this is kind of pointing to. So to begin, the strict non-dualist model of reality is we are, at our core, we are that which exists prior to all concepts. But our mind, which only knows concepts, says, well, what kind of concept is prior to all concepts? Give me a concept. I want God in a box. I want to own it, to hold it. So through ages, mystics have said, well, we are consciousness then, pure consciousness, or maybe a better finger pointing at the moon. And the trouble with fingers pointing at the moon is people fall in love with the finger and they say, now I own it. A better finger pointing at the moon might be to say, we are an action, an actionless action. So we are the act of experiencing. Experiences rise up in us and fall away, rise up in us and fall away. Without end, seemingly. But we are that action of what? Of perceiving those experiences. So, in the strict non-dualist system, there are a first separation and a second separation, even though they all happen simultaneously. And this awareness, for no apparent reason, becomes self-aware. And in that instant, the first and second separations happen. The I thought, God, Goddess, all it is, the oneness, all creation. And the I am thought, which is a unique perspective of all that is. It's aware that it is that which is prior to all creation. It's aware that it is all creation. And it's aware that it's a unique perspective. So if this ball was all creation, all that is, these here are endless pairs of eyes in this all creation. Many people call these pairs of eyes souls, creator gods, sparks of creative consciousness, things of that nature. And in all of reality, there are endless realities. It's like a beach of sand with endless sand on it. All the endless creations, all the endless realities. But a group of these pairs of eyes or beings or entities got together and said, hey, let's create a new reality where we can separate ourselves one step further and experience the reality of matter and see how far we can go away from God. And we all thought, if you're here, you were one of them. You said, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do that. That sounds like fun. So then we created the Earth Life System. The Earth Life System has 5 epochs, or like chapters in a book, or if this was an electronic video game, it would be 5 levels of gameplay. The entry level of gameplay, many of us know as by the name of Lemuria. People could come and go as they please, and many beings that wouldn't even consider these harder levels of gameplay would come and go. The reality was much more dreamlike. It would rise up and fall away, and rise up and fall away. Time and space weren't laws of physics yet. They were just suggestions for enhanced gameplay. But then, as we were playing, we thought, we could add a lot more emotional impact to this game if we put in some rules. Let's make time and space laws of physics, not just suggestions for enhanced gameplay. And let's make it that you can only incarnate as a human. You have to be born, live out that life, and then kill the video game icon in order to incarnate again. No more being a bug in a tree and a bee or what have you. Only human. And so this Atlantis epoch would happen, from our perspective here, we would say 2 billion to 1.5 billion years ago it started. And in Atlantis, unlike a lot of times we think that there's such a thing as evolution, and that we started as cavemen and got technologically advanced. In Atlantis, it was the opposite way. We started at the highest possible technology as we shifted from that Lemurian epoch into Atlantis. And there were 3 falls of Atlantis. Each fall was not as technologically advanced as the one before it. The third and final fall of Atlantis would be about 30,000 years ago from here. And then we thought, well, let's create another level of gameplay that's more shamanic, more mystical, where we'll use that template level and create things by getting together as a group and imagining it. And once it exists in that template level, it is going to be here. Things like Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid and Pumapunku that today scientists are looking at. How did they do that? Well, it's because they went to that template level of reality, which is a very occult thing, visualized this thing, and it appeared here, and it didn't matter if a carpenter came along and nailed a block of wood or not. Once the thing appears in that template level, it will appear here. Even today, we create this way, even though we say, oh, well, I dug this hole with a shovel and blah, blah, blah. That's just a story. It has to happen in the template level first, or it will never happen here. Once it happens in the template level, it is going to happen here. Absolutely. So we had fun with that epoch, from the end of Atlantis to the beginning of the old age, or the old energy. Many occult organizations, like the Masons, will estimate our time as being 6,000 years old. Why would they say that? We've got evidence of dinosaurs going back millions of years. How can you say it's 6,000 years old? Because that was when we stepped across the threshold from the Hathor time, or Anunnaki, or whatever you want to call that level, into that old age and the old energy. Now, the old age was the professional level of gameplay. Only serious gamers would come into that level because it was the harshest laws of physics, the shortest lifetimes for the video game icons. Only professional players would even consider coming into that level of gameplay because it was so difficult. On December 21st, 2012, many people, including Oneness University, claim humanity stepped over the threshold. People like Eckhart Tolle called his book A New Earth, because at that date, we stepped over the threshold into the new energy. To those of us that did it, we say, well, it's the same Earth, it's the same physics it always has been, but it isn't. And the more we can see a difference, the more we will see a difference. For the first time since we created this reality of gameplay, from Lemuria to Atlantis, Atlantis to the Hathors, Hathors to the old energy, we've gone down the chain away from God, thickening the veil, making it harder and harder for anyone to operate from this. And during the old energy, anybody that was operating from this got worshipped and probably killed. Most of us operate here, this third separation. In this new age and new energy, we have agreed to lighten up the veil ever so slightly. And by doing that, we're allowing ourselves access to all these other realities and laws of physics, not to mention aliens, as it were. So, what is an alien? That's not one there. Me at San Diego Zoo. An alien gets very difficult to put in a box because it's not that kind of energy that wants to be boxed. So the simplest possible explanation of what is an alien is it is somebody who's operating with a totally different operating belief system than what we are. So if we come face to face with someone who doesn't eat food, for instance, consciously we might not be aware that this person doesn't eat food and has never eaten food, but our ego knows, and our ego is going to feel irritated and threatened because this person can show me that all the things that I believe are true are false. And so the ego gets scared. At the very least, it's going to get irritated, and it's our own resistances come up. When it comes to what is an alien, in this reality itself, we're talking about our solar system, the other solar systems, this galaxy, the other endless galaxies out there, but we're also talking about the daydream state, the meditative states, the deep dream states, the between-life incarnational state. Should we come face to face with a human from 200 years ago or into the future, our ego will probably say, this person really believes some weird stuff and they're an alien. Let alone, if they come from one of these other epochs and we come face to face with them, they're going to say, oh, these people aren't operating by the same system as me at all. This person's an alien. So there's an explanation kind of some of the aliens that we run into. Some of the aliens are going to be extraterrestrials from our physical reality, but not Earth. And many come from this. A story that I'll relate to you involves a famous remote viewer from the U.S. Army. He was brought to the Pentagon and he was given a time and a location and asked, the table was surrounded with brass, generals and officers. What do you see? And he starts to describe what is obviously an underground military installation. And he says, oh wait, there's a metal disc going low over the ground. And it's going fast. And they said, well, how fast? And he said, I don't know, 4,500 miles an hour maybe? Then it makes a 90-degree turn and takes off super fast. They show him 2 pictures from satellite that a satellite had snapped just before it made the 90-degree turn and took off. He said, is this what you saw? And he says, yeah. And he said, well, is it manned? And he said, yeah, it's manned. Well, who is it? The Chinese, the Russians, who? He says, well, it's like they're from the future, but it's not our future. And it's like they're from Earth, but it's not really our Earth. This particular group that he was talking about were gray aliens. Of all the alien body types, the gray alien body type is the most common. There are so many different civilizations of gray aliens that even the grays with the intellectual might don't know how many there are. So this particular group had come from the future if Atlantis had not ended, but had gone into what we would call the future. And the reason that they were here, in their timeline, their DNA was timing out and they were dying for no reason. So with their intellect, they thought, well, what if there are other possible and probable Earths? And what if some of these other Earths have DNA that doesn't time out? And we could blend it with ours and, keep our civilization alive. So they figured out a way to tunnel through into the other Earth reality timelines. And when they got to ours was one of the ones where the DNA does not time out. So at that time we were in the old energy. And in the old energy, humanity was definitely a consensus reality. So they came to humanity in our between-life incarnational state, in our deep dream states, in our between-the-moment states. And they said, humans, we have a problem. Our DNA times out and we're dying out. And we could really use some of your biological material. And most of humanity threw their arms up in the air and ran away in horror. They wanted nothing to do with that weirdness. But here and there, some of us waved our arms in the air and said, I want to help, pick me. And they said, well, thank you very much. It's nice of you to offer. But in order to be of any use to us, you would have to incarnate in the same bloodlines for hundreds, if not thousands of years, till we got enough biological material
for this experiment that we're doing? Are you really interested in incarnating in the same bloodline for such long periods of time? And so those of us that are interested said, sure, no problem, we'll do that. Then they said, well, wait, there's more. When you incarnate as a human, you're going to forget all about that we made this deal. And you're going to holler and swear that we're pulling you out of your toasty warm beds at night and doing all these awful experiments on you against your will. Those of us that are interested said, no problem, we'll sign a waiver giving you permission because we know that sooner or later we're going to die, and sooner or later we're going to awaken, and we're going to remember that we made this deal. Very simple. Thank you very much for your help. And that's the story of that particular program. A story of that particular program. So then, as we enter into the pop culture of alien interactions with humans, I don't know if anybody here, probably not, probably nobody heard this story on the radio when it happened, the War of the Worlds. My grandmother did, and she told my grandpa that Mars was invading. He said, oh, they are. So anyway, that's us in the Milky Way galaxy. And scientists have wondered because our solar system and many of our planets and so on are not as old as a lot of the Milky Way galaxy. How can that be? It is speculated that we're not actually from the Milky Way, we're from the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy, which was closer to the Big Bang when it happened, so it's moving faster than the Milky Way, and it caught the Milky Way, and the Milky Way being way bigger is eating us up. But we're actually from the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy that's collided with the Milky Way. And that's why our planets and suns and so on are so much younger. What is it that got the attention of the aliens in the first place? Many people that have human-alien interactions claim that it's the same thing. You all recognize that, of course. The nuclear explosion at the end of World War II, we made a few of those. Aliens claim that this tears a hole not only in the fabric of our reality, but it goes through into theirs as well. And some of the aliens claim that they're here repairing the damage done when we've exploded nuclear devices. And they claim that if we were to explode one, or try to explode one that was so big, they couldn't repair the damage. They would stop us. They would deactivate it. But that's what a lot of them say got their attention and brought them home. On February 25th, 1942, a UFO or a group of UFOs went from Alaska all the way down the west coast of the United States to Baja, and then back up the coast again. Now, the U.S. had entered World War II by a couple of months by this point, and were armed to the teeth. So Douglas James Cotterill, who does the Edgar Casey thing, he's Canadian as well, goes to sleep, and then you can ask him questions. He was asked, who were these people in that craft that came during the Battle of L.A. in 1942? He said, these were people from what would be called Atlantis or Lemuria. Depending on where you draw that line in the sand and say, well, this is Lemuria and this is Atlantis. Because that's a big span of time. 1947, big year for alien UFO lore. A light aircraft pilot named Kenneth Arnold sees a string of 9 shiny objects, and he coins the term flying saucer. Not because they were flying between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams, and he estimated their speed around 1,200 miles an hour, which was unbelievable at that time. He called them flying saucers not because they looked like saucers, they looked like this, but because they skipped along like saucers. And what was so typically alien of the way that they moved is they were like a kite string playing follow the leader. If we see objects in the sky that are doing follow the leader or no apparent pattern, that's probably alien. When we see people flying in V shapes and modern military formations, that's Earth stuff. Not alien. That's real. So that happened in June of 47. In July of 47, the Roswell crash happened. This is an actual picture through Air Force One. It was in the newspapers. My grandma had copies of that as well. And then, of course, they retracted it and said, well, they mixed up for a weather balloon. This is probably the actual craft. And as you can see from this craft, this shape has really changed the way we viewed aircraft and started to make those stealth craft. A lot of engineering technology was mined from this Roswell crash, no question about it. We'll hear from a fellow later on about that. Just cover over the lake with a sticker or something. This is Darryl Anka, another Canadian, who lives down in Hollywood, and he works in the special effects industry. And when he first got to Hollywood in the 70s, he was told to take a channeling course, and when he did, out popped Bashar. Bashar claims to be one of the 5 human, gray alien hybrid civilizations. He likes the number 5. And is a future incarnation of Darryl. And they said that Darryl agreed to channel them before he was born, and did he still want to do that? And he said, yeah, he liked the information that they were giving, so he would continue to channel them. So he was asked about the Roswell crash, and he said they were one of the 5 hybrid races as well, but not his race. And they got struck by an electric bolt, probably lightning or something, wrecked their instruments, and they crashed. George Van Tassel in 1948 quit a good job in the beginning of the aerospace industry, working for McDonnell Douglas and these types of companies. And after talking with aliens who claimed they were from Venus, moved his wife and 3 daughters up to the California desert to Landers, California, near Big Rock, and started building this thing that he called the Integratron. Aliens had instructed him on how to build this building. When Yogananda heard about it, he sent his 3 favorite devotees down to help build the Integratron. Van Tassel was told that the Integratron would assist with cell regeneration by people who went into it, time travel, anti-gravity, and reverse aging. When Van Tassel died, some men in black came and removed all the electronic equipment from the building. It still exists, and it's like within 2 hours of a friend of mine that I visit frequently, half an hour out of my way, and I don't go see him. I don't know. But they hold gong bath ceremonies and stuff there, the 2 women that own it now. And it still has some kind of energy spike in the center of the building that isn't unexplainable. George Van Tassel knew all the who's who of the day for UFO alien lore. They used to gather at his place, which was his big way of making income at that time. They would camp out there and listen to same songs. Daniel Fry worked for the rocket industry in White Sands, New Mexico, and had the best pictures at that time, moving pictures of flying saucers. Billy Meyer, who is a contactee from Switzerland, was told by his aliens that most of the interactions between flying saucers and humans are of earthly origin, not alien. So Billy Meyer asked them about Daniel Fry, and they went in a time traveling machine and looked at Daniel Fry's contacts, and they said, yep, they're legitimate. They're alien. The White Sands incident is his book about one day he was walking outside the barracks at night. There was a flying saucer sitting on the ground with the door open. A voice inside it said, get in. He got in, and it took him from White Sands to New York and back in like 20 minutes. And was remote controlled by a craft that was 900 miles away, according to the voice. These are the kind of human-looking guys that he met. That's Billy Meyer, the guy that was asked. Now, DC was buzzed by a bunch of flying saucers, the UFO flap of 1952. And George Van Tassel sent 2 letters to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base saying that aliens are going to come and buzz DC just to show humanity that they're there, not because it's any kind of threat. So, of course, the U.S., as soon as they saw the flying saucers, they scrambled the jets, and jets went up and couldn't see anything, so they come and land. And people on the ground said, well, they're still there. They would go up again, and same thing. Now, there is a group of humans who claim that this was them, but I doubt very much, because this group was flying in no perceivable pattern. And that group that claims responsibility did not resist flying in a V-shaped pattern. They would have to. George Adamski went around the world telling about his interactions with aliens who claimed to be from Venus. Now, the thing about this aliens from Venus thing is, like Howard Menger said, if you asked our astronauts when they came back from the moon, where'd you come from? They'd say the moon. But that doesn't make the moon then. Either these aliens are living in a different dimension on Venus, because obviously Venus is very inhospitable, or they're using Venus as some kind of a portal because they feel very Palladian-like to me. And Venus feels very Palladian-like to me. It has that loving you to the core heart energy. He was even given a medal by the Pope of the day for his work as a liaison between humanity and the aliens he was interacting with. Talked until he died around the world about UFOs and aliens. Howard Menger, sign painter and machinist, and had contacts with beautiful-looking Palladian-type woman all his life. And when he saw her, like 10 or 20 years later, he said, "Oh, you haven't aged a bit." And she said, "Well, I am over 500 years old." He was known to be able to call in the ships. And so the FBI got him to do that one day. And so he starts calling in the flying saucer, and it gets bigger and bigger, and then takes off. And Howard asked them, "Well, why did you leave?" And they said, "Well, because the FBI fellow had a gun, and we didn't want to come if he's got a weapon." And a lot of aliens say that same thing, that humanity is almost like an insane asylum where the inmates have guns and they're really apprehensive about coming here. So he got the FBI guy to leave his gun at home, and the next time he called them in, they came in, and they landed. And two men and a woman got out. The two men went around each side of the craft and back in the door. The woman came towards them, towards Howard and the FBI guy, pushed a button on her utility belt, which became a light, got bigger and bigger and bigger. Poof, she's gone. And he hollers inside the craft, "Where'd she go?" And they said, "She's in here with us." She teleported back. This is a likeness of that contact person. Here's a picture of her with them. Bashar says, were we to go back 200 years in time and get our picture taken with the humans at that time, it would look like this on a photograph. If indeed the people at that time could even see us, because they would just see us like that too, because we're vibrating at such a higher rate than say 200 years ago. Now Howard wrote several books and had free energy devices and motors, and in 1951 he built a radio-controlled flying saucer using the electrogravitics that the aliens had taught him. He was flying it in the backyard and it got away on him. It crashed 200 miles away on an interstate. 2 weeks later, the FBI come pounding on his door and said, "No, we went to the store where you bought the electronic components for this thing, and you are to cease and desist in making any more of these craft because it's a matter of national security." Words you don't really want to hear. And the DOD, the Department of Defense, is going to be here in a week or two to talk to you about this. I absolutely guarantee you that if the Department of Defense did not have electrogravitic machines at that time, they'd have been on his doorstep yesterday. We already have this technology. By we, I mean, a certain part of humanity. Like that guy. 2 weeks later, they did come, and then he spent a couple of years building 2 life-size craft for them. And the Department of Defense people, Howard had fought in World War II, thought he was a good U.S. citizen and all that. And so they'd asked him to stop talking to any more UFO groups, stop contact with aliens, stop making any more of these devices, because it's a matter of national security, and in 30 years or so, all this is going to become known anyway. So for 30 years, he was quiet. Actually, he was quiet for 35 years. And nothing happened. We still don't have electric gravitics. How come? So he wrote a book called The High Bridge Incident, which tells his story about how he made, kept quiet and built the 2 life-size ones for the U.S. government. And then here he's displaying some free energy collection devices. His plan was to make 3 different sizes, one that was big enough for a house, the next one that was big enough for a school, and then one that was big enough for small villages or malls. And that hasn't happened. Well, he's getting it. Very interesting dude. And you can tell he's super nice. So many of these people that have interactions with the aliens tend to be very spiritual and just super nice people. He says that the electric gravitics works the same way as when you put a funnel on the end of an air hose, and if you push the air hose so that it's blowing air out of the funnel, and you put a ball on the end, it will stay there and just roll through the whole thing. It works with a similar principle as that. It does work. Try it. I had another experiment that I should have. There won't be time anyway. That also indicates electric gravitics. Oh, I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? Still going the wrong way. Oh. So, a question that is often asked: if aliens are real, why don't they land on the White House lawn and make themselves known? You ever hear that question before? They did. They landed 14 miles from the Pentagon in Virginia. 2 law enforcement sheriff's departments fought to bring, this is Valiant Thor, Tanya, Don, Jill, 4 aliens who use the last name Thor as a tether to our reality. And as a backstory, then they can say that the Hathor and humanity has an ancestor with them, known as the Hathors. It's a very Palladian type story. Now, when Valiant Thor and co landed, their pictures, their likenesses were in newspapers and so on. The reason that Tanya is covering her face is because she was working with a lot of the alphabet soup people, so she didn't want her likeness in their possession. Alphabet soup. Howard also had many gatherings until the Defense Department told him to stop it at his place. And many people, had pictures of these guys. Here, Tanya moved out of the way. Many people had pictures of these guys. So to say, why don't they land on the White House lawn and make themselves known? They tried. It was us, humanity, that wasn't ready. Are we ready now? This guy is Frank Stranges. He became known as the Flying Saucer Preacher because he got a picture of Valiant Thor, and he would have it on display when he gave his Christian sermons. And after one of his sermons, a woman from the Pentagon walked up to Strangers and said, "Would you like to meet him?" Pointing to Valiant Thor. And he said, "Well, yeah, of course I would." So she says, "Be at in front of your hotel tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And he did. And she took him into the Pentagon, and she said, "Now, when we walk through security, there's going to be 2 securities. When we walk through, you are to open up your jacket like this, as if showing your badge, your security badge." And he says, "But I don't have a security badge." She says, "Just do what you're told." So she goes through security, shows her badge. He follows her, goes through security. So he goes and meets Valiant Thor and says, "Just a wonderful guy, this Valiant Thor." Loved him. And Valiant Thor says, "Would you like to meet again?" And he said, "Sure." So they had many interactions, and then even, in 1957, Valiant Thor and Co. landed, and then they left in 1960. He had an apartment at the Pentagon, and there were orders to keep him there, but he just teleported out and went back when he left. But since then, he would come and visit Dr. Strange just about once a year, drop in and visit him, teleport into the backseat of his car or whatever, and whoa! That's kind of scary. Where'd you come from? Strange wrote Stranger at the Pentagon, which is kind of a lot of the stories about when Valiant Thor was a guest, a so-called guest of the Pentagon. He wrote quite a few books. Strangers did. And talked all around the world about these interactions. Now, this is 1963, and we're coming into the more, what do you call these, abduction stories. And this story in particular says, in my day we were building pyramids on Earth, none of that new thing of abduction Mars. This couple was odd for a couple of reasons. They were living in the U.S., and black and white couple. In 1963, that would have been pretty rare. And they were coming back from visiting relatives in Quebec, going back to Vermont where they lived. And it's the typical abduction story: car stalls on the highway, gray aliens pick them up, and this is a t-shirt from the future. I'm going to tell you about this a little later. But that's interesting. It says, I was abducted by aliens, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. And you can see that it's not made for her, it's made for something bigger. So when she was on the craft, she noticed a star map on the wall, which she redrew, and an astronomer named Fish, through trial and error, found out that this was the Zeta Reticuli system. But she asked the Zeta Reticuli Grays, where are you from on this map? And they said, well, do you know where you're from? She said, no. I said, well, what good would it do to tell you that where we're from it? Like she's some kind of idiot, right? And to the Grays, they think that we're like bugs or insects or animals. It's pretty stupid. And that's a really stupid question. No, dear aliens, I'm sick and tired of being subjected to your humiliating procedures. Betty and Vishen Lukas, same type of thing as the Hill, but a totally different experience. Hers was totally spiritual. Her gray alien, she thought of as angelic, if not angels, angelic for sure. They took her on their craft to a door that they called the Door of One, and only she could go in it. And when she went in it, she had this profound experience that even in her hypnosis, she could not explain it. Billy Meyer. It is worth getting a copy of one of his coffee table books just for the sheer amount of perfect pictures of flying saucers. Back in the 60s and 70s, these books are from the 70s, almost all pictures were blurry or whatever, out of focus or something. His were perfect. Oh, both of them. And by the time you get to the end of the book, it's almost like a matter of fact, seeing these flying saucers. His great aliens claim to be, or his Palladian aliens, even what the Palladian aliens, claim to be from the Palladians, and that they left him here as a liaison with humanity to reincarnate in our system as their tether here. Well, this guy, Randolph Winters, we're lucky that he went there. In the early 80s, a guy named Wendell Stevens went and saw Billy Meyer and studied his material and came back and was telling everybody in America about it. Randolph Winters heard about it and went over there to visit Billy too. And he took cameras, and Billy is a very spiritual, open, soft kind of a guy. When the alphabet soup people come, they walk all over him. And they do come, because he got way better intel than they did. There's a picture of a flying saucer that he took when he was in India one time, over a temple. Apparently, Hindu temples attract that kind of activity. The Pleiades. This is Sam Jessie, the last girl that he's been interacting with to the present day. And they won't allow him to take their likeness until they're leaving because, again, they interact with the alphabet soup groups and they don't want them having a picture. This is Asket. She interacted with Billy for many years and allowed him to take her picture when she was leaving. That there is that with the Jimpy edges on it is a time travel machine so that they can go back in time and see, if people are having legitimate alien interactions. These Palladian aliens claim, just like Valiant Thor and Co., that they are humanity's big brothers, and they're protecting us from so-called illegal alien interactions that they feel would be harmful to humanity. There's one landed on the ground, which is very odd because they ground out, and it takes a little while to power up when they do that because they ground themselves up. He gets into this craft, and the walls go see-through, and he can take a picture in any direction. And here you can see, this is typical of how aliens fly. They're in a flying saucer, following a flying saucer, and there's another one up there. Follow the leader style. They came and got him in 1975 and took him to look at this. The Soviets and NASA looking up in space with Earth as a background. Now these pictures are horrible, but if it wasn't for Randolph Winters taking these, still in their plastic jackets, on Billy Meyer's coffee table, we wouldn't have record of them at all because there is a humanity doesn't seem to want it out in the open just yet. Do we? Or do we? After showing him that hookup in space, they took him on to Mars in 1975, and there were all kinds of Earth-made satellites orbiting Mars in 1975. 2 large manned space stations. One that was black with no markings on it, and one that was white with a distinct U.S. flag on it. NASA probably forgot about it. I mean, they're busy. They got lots of stuff going on, right? They probably forgot to tell us. This here is a mothership of the Palladians against Jupiter, so you can see how big it is. They took him on this trip. He spent another 3 months on this craft. Took 18 rolls of film, and when he got back, one of the alphabet soup people stole his film from the photo lab people. Because it was way better intel than what they had, right? Here's the craft as he got closer to it. Here, he told his Palladians that he was interested in seeing dinosaurs, so they put him in a suit. They said the planets that have dinosaurs aren't really suitable for humans without protection. And here's one of the dinosaurs. Here's one dropping food. Here's a bird with teeth. Here's a plant that its head moved. Here's an ancient Earth with 2 moons, and they told him that neither one of those is the moon that we have today. Here's typical humans flying saucers. Can't resist. Got to do that military V-shaped formation. This is probably that German group that we'll talk about here. When they came back from Mars, they took Billy to South America, and he saw row upon row of flying saucers sitting on the ground with iron crosses on them. These were the first ones that were made at toward the end of World War II, and then these ones more modern, 75. This group is probably a breakaway civilization because they no longer seem to have much to do with the rest of humanity. And something that happens is if you get electric gravitics, you are really quickly going to get free energy. And once you have free energy, what do you need money for? So then your society can get to an apex and break away, as this group seems to have. That was probably Valiant Thor's craft there. That's what his looks like. Shirley MacLaine and all the who's who of the spiritual alien people went to see Billy back in the day. His pictures are just awesome. This is typical of gray alien craft. The reason that the Palladians use these craft to interact with humanity is for our benefit, to meet us halfway. Palladian aliens, if they want to be here, they'll just teleport into the reality. They don't use technology. It's not as we can do it anyway. But to meet humanity halfway, humans can kind of get their mind around gray alien technology. So we kind of understand it. So by using gray alien technology to interact with us, it's like meeting us halfway. This is the language of those Palladians. Douglas James Cotterill was asked if Billy Meyer was really meeting up with these aliens, and he said, yeah, he is. I don't know why they made friends with him. He couldn't hook into that incarnation thing. And I've been told by psychics that one of the most intimate things that we have is our other incarnations. We don't usually share that even with our own self consciously, let alone other people. So the pyramids were made, I guess. Travis Walton story, again, 1975. There was a logger in the woods in Arizona, and Douglas Cotterill was asked about his interaction, and he said that because he went up the alien craft in a threatening manner, see, they were leaving the site for the day because it was getting dark, and they saw a bright light. So they drove the pickup over to the site, and there was a flying saucer hovering. Travis Walton, for whatever reason, jumped out of the craft and ran towards, or jumped out of his pickup and ran towards the craft. Truck's full of guys. They realize that about 2 miles down the road that Travis is better. He jumped out. And so they go back to pick up Travis, and he's gone. The aliens, gray aliens in this case, thought he was coming at them in a threatening manner. So they just bagged him and tagged him. When they learned everything they wanted to learn from him, they brought him back and let him go. When he got onto the mothership, Travis claimed that there were many ships in the cargo bay of different kinds and lots of human-looking aliens around as well. Douglas James Cotterill was asked where they came from, and they said, well, in the direction of Sirius, but way past Sirius, a long ways away towards the center of the galaxy, even by astronomical standards, it was a long ways. And when they picked up Travis, they took him almost to the center of the galaxy as they were finding out whatever it is that they wanted to find out about him. Then they brought him back and let him go. Many of the people who get tagged relax, letting you go, insurance didn't come through. Many of the people who get tagged, it's for the same reason that we tag animals, to keep track of where we are. Some people get these things put in as a way to control their health. Oftentimes, the interaction between human and alien ends up being very healing and actually good for the human. Whitley Strieber wrote lots of books about his interaction with graves. Here's Darryl Anka again, the guy that channels Bashar. He's channeling Bashar right there. He claims that Bashar looks like this. They have a kind of Mongolian features. The males have no hair, the females have hair, and it's pure white. And a friend of mine said that she met her hybrid daughter who had pure white hair and Mongolian features, but her face on it. And so then I introduced her to the Bashar material. Bashar has all kinds of DVDs and CDs on just about any kind of topic you'd be interested in. They're quite interesting. This guy is Jim Sparks. In the late 80s, he became aware that he was being abducted. And he hated the Greys that were doing the abductions. Cursed at them, and they kept him frozen so he couldn't move, immobilized. And they would ask him to do something. And he resisted and resisted and resisted. And finally, after 6 years of this, he agrees to do what they asked him to do. Well, they take him home right away. He realized, oh, if I do what they want, they'll just take me home right away. So he started doing what they wanted. Totally different scenario. Now he loves when the Greys come to pick him up. Can't wait for the next interaction. He always learned something, and they let him ask a question. For the Greys to let a human, imbecile, ask them a question is almost unheard of, because they think they're so stupid. So he has learned many things, and he said that he doesn't know what the Grey alien agenda, these Greys that he's interested in, what their agenda is, but it's for our own good. At one point, he went to visit them, and they gave him a little box like the size of a Rubik's Cube. And he said, "What is this?" And they said, "It's a gift for you." So he's trying to force the box open. He can't open it. And they said, "Try easy." So he tried it easy, and it opened. He's looking inside the box, and there's this gray, tarry stuff in there that stinks. And he said, "What kind of gift is that?" And they said, he's a very heavy smoker, "We removed that from your lungs." He said, "With this kind of technology, we could clean up the earth in like hours, not even weeks or months." And they said, "We've given this technology to every country, every major country on their planet. They all do the same thing, turn it into weapons and hide it away. Now we're going into people's dream times and between life incarnational states and giving them this information anyway. So you'll have it." Bob Lazar story. Bob Lazar came forward that he had been in Area 51 and shown some a flying saucer at Groom Lake S4. And he said there were 9 bay doors, and one day he saw all the doors open and everyone had a different kind of craft in it. He was told, again, he called this the sport model, again, typical of gray alien type craft. When he got into it, and one of the good indicators that it was an alien craft, when he saw it from the outside, he said, "Oh, this is what people are talking about when they say they've been seen flying saucers. It's some kind of advanced Earth thing." Then he went inside, and he said it was made for like children. It was very small seats. And this feeling came over him of, "You should not be here," which is so typical of what happens when our ego comes face to face with alien and alien artifacts. Our resistances come up, we get this feeling of, "I just shouldn't be here." So he worked on this craft for a little bit and then told about it until they fired him. He says, "That was the worst thing he ever did, was telling about it." Then he lost that job of being able to work with this high tech. So many years passed, and he went to his old boss, and his old boss hired him again. He says, "I'm not telling anything about what I'm working on now." This is one of the things to come out of that Roswell crash. When the Soviets shot down a U-2 in 1962, this thing was flying immediately. We already had them. They're made of titanium that we had to buy from Russia. Was there really a Cold War? Maybe at the little people level, at our level. But the higher ups, I don't think so. The Soviets knew very well what they were selling all this titanium for. Because these craft, this is an SR-71 Blackbird. It's as big as a house. It's as big as this building we're in. And it flew faster than the bullet from a 30-06 flight. If it flew past you, you might not even see it. It's as big as a house. None were ever shot down. This one's a trainer because it's got 2 cabins. This one is the actual SR-71. And they had a lot of electrogravitic additives on there that when they pulled these out of service in the early 90s, the CIA wanted them all chopped. That's where all the titanium's coming from. When you wonder where all these wrenches with titanium, made out of titanium and so on, they're coming from these craft because the CIA wanted them all chopped. Just by looking at it, people that know what they're looking for will see various electrogravitic influences on it, as well as anti-radar. This is something we recognize because we see these. You can even see the SR-71 Blackbirds now because some of the people kept them, and they are in museums now. Exotic craft that goes in and out of the atmosphere. More exotic craft. This here is something that is loosely referred to as the TR-3B. In the early 90s, humanity already had 3 of these at over $1 trillion each to build. Back in the early 90s, $1 trillion was a lot of money. Not like today. This craft implements counter-revolving magnetized liquid metal that when it hits 60,000 or 100,000 RPM, it sets up a torsion field and just like a bubble. In an instant, this thing moves to another location in our solar system, in our galaxy, in another galaxy. The movement is instantaneous. They say it doesn't actually move, the target comes to it. More diagrams of the TR-3D. This is believed to be the craft that humanity is right now using as a kind of Star Trek-like craft, going to other solar systems. And in order to keep the European community quiet about all this stuff, supposedly the US, the secret space people have shared this technology with the Europeans to keep them happy doing something. That's what they're doing with it. But right now, we probably have a lot of these craft. There was a time, the Palladians claimed that until 2012, humanity was under their protection because we couldn't get out of our solar system. But after 2012, we worked out the math. That's what this guy says too. Ben Rich, who was the CEO of the Lockheed Skunk Works, built a lot of these different kinds of craft. On his deathbed in 1995, he said, if you can imagine it, we already know how to build it. We can take ET home and it won't be, rocket propulsion unit. And it won't take lifetimes to do it. Star Wars will be jealous if they knew what we really have. But of course, he thought it would take an active thought to ever set them out of black projects. Here's a picture of many of the different conspiracy theories. Weather balloon. When will full UFO phenomena be disclosed? Well, Stephen Greer started the Disclosure Project in the early 90s, at a White House press conference. Many of these people are insiders. This guy here worked for years in retrieving UFOs and alien bodies. Clifford Stone, Sergeant Clifford Stone. He's got a book about it. And you can tell that it really affected him running into these alien beings. And he certainly didn't want to shoot him. Larry King Live, he's talked about UFOs and aliens. I was abducted by aliens. Abduction was nothing, and the gift shop blew me away. That must be where it is. Alex Collier, I don't know whether I should talk about him or not. His information is good, but he's so fear-based that I'm almost reluctant to because of that fear-based. In the 60s, NASA took a whole bunch of pictures of the moon with this craft. His aliens, but this was before NASA got in the habit of airbrushing out all the pictures. So, Alex Collier's alien contacts have pointed out many structures on the moon that were taken in pictures, and they say this monument is some kind of reptilian creature, and it's 8 miles high. There is no possible way that he went in the backside of the moon and missed that. Here's a derelict craft. This is probably that swastika-shaped building that belongs to the German breakaway group. Here's a derelict craft that we're going to talk about a little later. UFO Mania, the Phoenix Lights, March 13th, 1997. A craft that was over a mile across flew low over Phoenix. Kurt Russell was being interviewed and just out of nowhere said, yeah, I was landing a light aircraft taking my kid back to university, and I saw the Phoenix Lights. There wasn't any Army flares either. This craft, according to Bashar, is the first group of aliens that are going to have open human-alien contact because they look human. So they don't really... Gray aliens would love to be first on the queue to have open contact with humanity. But because of how they look, and particularly how they feel, humanity is like, oh, that's not happening. You guys are just too weird. But these more human-looking ones, they're going to be the first ones on the queue. The day after Roswell, Philip Corso was a liaison between the U.S. Army and the various corporations and Bell Labs and so on. He would take them things like the gray alien eyepieces and say, we found this and we think it's Chinese. Make it for us. If you just went to those labs and said, we want an eyepiece that can do this and this and this and magnify to this and see in the dark and blah, blah, blah. They say, can't be done. But when you show them a piece of technology and say, we picked this up, we think maybe it was Chinese. Make it for us. Well, then the engineers know it can be done. So then they're going to make it, one way or another. And Corso said that he spent his career doing that, getting bits and pieces of probably some of the Roswell crash and others. Douglas James Cotterill. There's a picture of some of the Clarion people who are supposedly living underground in Italy. The reason that they are living in Italy, she looks like a child, but she's probably 500 or 600 years old. They are living underground in Italy because they created AI and they gave it autonomy. And so often, secret space people say, Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk with Tesla cars, build AI, do not give it autonomy. Because what happens is often autonomy goes psycho and tries to kill the humans that build it. That's what happened. They claim that their AI was trying to kill them all so that they leave the Earth and let them. Oh, another shit. This guy, Stan Rona, he's got some of the funniest stories. This guy is worth listening to in interviews because he's a gadget guy, so he always has a handycam handy, and he has all these funny interactions that happen to him. This is a woman that he saw from the time he was small, and she has 3 fingers. He ran into these possum people who seem like maybe one of the 5 hybrid races because they're kind of human looking, and he knows that he has fathered many children. We're going to see some of them. He also dreams up different formulas or comes back from an abduction, and he's got all these formulas. That when he's taken to scientists, they say this is really deep theory about time and space and so on. These are pictures of inserts that were taken out. See, there's a... So, one day, and these people that are involved in abductions, quite often, they become aware of when it's getting close to abduction time. So he would go to bed wearing his shirt that his buddies made up because they knew he was being abducted, that said, I got abducted by aliens and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. Wakes up in the morning under the kitchen table and he's wearing a woman's nightie with Mickey Mouse on it. His wife comes downstairs and says, oh, you're wearing a woman's nightie. You got Mickey Mouse on it. And it was years later. So he was abducted in 2003. Her 1963. She comes back wearing this t-shirt that's not even made yet. The 1963. This was on the same UFO run. To the Greys, time means nothing. They just put in and out where they feel like it. And so they picked him up and her up on the same run. And when they put them back, they gave them each other's clothes. Either because they have a sense of humor or I don't know. But anyway, for years, she had this t-shirt that she'd gotten on her abduction. And I don't think at first she thought it was all that funny. She eventually gave it away to Goodwill. And then she's at a UFO conference, and Stan Romanek is talking, and he's showing this nightie, and she says, that's my nightie. I was wearing that on the night when I was abducted in 1963, and then came back wearing this t-shirt and said, I got abducted by aliens. And he said, that's my t-shirt. But she didn't have it anymore, unfortunately. Now, his aliens call him Starseed. Starseed and Wanderer are quite often the terms that people use for aliens who incarnate as humans. Here's a picture of them. Guy peeking. Another guy peeking. They will land on his lawn, and if the lawn ornaments are in the way, they'll move anywhere. On the roof, doesn't matter. What difference would that make? As long as they're there, right? That was one of the formulas, and there's a spot from. He was due for surgery the next day after an abduction, and when he went in to see the doctor says, "You don't need the surgery anymore. Your knee is healed." They healed it. Pictures of dropping down. Some of the formulas that he draws. Another guy, apparently he says that the aliens themselves like technology too, so if he leaves a camera laying around, they'll often take a picture of themselves as they're monkeying around with it, curious about stuff. Ew! That ever happened to you? Here's one that's in a cloaking device in his house. Here, it's holding the TV remote, but wearing a cloaking device. Here, the cat is looking at it. There's a black triangle that he saw outside his window when he had some kind of interaction going on in the house. This, he says, is one of his daughters. That's another one. That's Stan. These girls, his kids, come to visit him from time to time. And I've been told by others that sometimes the Greys want you to hug your children, so you get some interaction with humans rather than with Greys. This is the size of the footprint of the little girl that was standing outside the window looking in. They're very tiny. Cloaking device. There's Stan. And he is funny. 9 a.m., 9 p.m., and now you say you need a feeling for school project tomorrow. This story happened in, supposedly in 2007. I didn't see it until later. But remember when we saw the Soviets and NASA hooking up in space? Many people call that Apollo 18. And the Soviets had known about this derelict craft that Alex Collier showed us in those pictures, sitting on the backside of the moon. But the Soviets didn't think they quite had good enough rockets to get there. And they knew that NASA had at least two Saturn V's left over. And they made a deal with NASA that they would build the lunar lander if NASA would let them use the Saturn V, and they would go to the moon and investigate this craft. This craft can be seen. It's 3.5 miles long by a half mile wide. It is huge. To get it in perspective, that would be like 35. A city block there's about 10 city blocks to a mile. So that's 35 city blocks long by 5 city blocks wide. You realize what a big area that is. You go there, investigate that, you run out of time for sure. However, here's something interesting that happened when they got there. Apollo 19 hit some debris on the way in, and it crashed, had to come back to Earth. And so Apollo 20 made it all the way up to the moon and investigated. This is a woman who does remote viewing, and she is awesome. If you get a chance to watch her YouTube video of remote viewing this, it's worth watching. She gets everything. It's quite good. You maybe know her, do you?
I don't know her.
Paul does.
Yeah.
There's a city that they found near that derelict craft. And when they got up there, it's like the derelict craft itself was a big arrow. I mean, there was stuff in it, and they went inside it and looked a little bit. I mean, it's 3.5 miles long, half mile wide. When they got there, it was almost like a big arrow. These are, according to the remote viewer, sound beam weapons shot at this thing 1.5 billion years ago. So that hole as big as a house. Huge. Here gives us some example of how big that craft is. But the thing is, it was almost like an arrow pointing to two triangular-shaped objects that were on the ground. One of those triangular-shaped objects was broken open by a meteor. The other one, the astronauts couldn't get into. When they got into the one on the ground that was broken open, they found a woman, naked, in perfect condition. She had wires on her one hand, attached to the console of the ship. They think she was a pilot. That's a triangular-shaped craft that was in front of that giant barrel. There was also a mine nearby. This is the triangular-shaped craft. They believe that they had sat on the ground for 1.5 billion years, both the two triangles and the giant 3.5 mile long. This is the woman that they found with this very occult-looking bracket on her face that they believed was a pilot. Something that's interesting is she was obviously using inner vision to pilot the craft because it holds her physical eyes closed and it goes to her third eye. Also holds her mouth in that classic out-of-body jaw thing that ask anybody who does the classic out-of-body thing and they'll tell you about the jaw thing. It's the reason that morticians tend to sew the mouth closed on a lot of cadavers. People often die in that way when they do their last out-of-body. And you can trick yourself into having an out-of-body. If you're interested in it, try it. Play with your mouth. And you'll find, isn't there a place? So, some of us that do that kind of thing. I've been told that it helps with the noise. Because you know that's that, when you're doing that out-of-body thing, there's that place and bang and stuff. But at any rate, they took this bracket off of her face, took her back to the lunar lander, and before they got back to Earth, she woke up. And she would be, my ego calls her an Atlantean, because she comes from that 1.5 billion years ago, transitioned from Lemuria to Atlantis area. Even though, in a way, the Hathors are not our ancestors, and the Atlanteans are not our ancestors, and the Lemurians are not our past. They're different chapters of the book, different realities, kind of. So, not only was she able to jump ahead 1.5 billion years in time, but, 3 levels of gameplay? From Atlantis to the Hathor to the old energy? 2 levels. She calls her Cheryl Hun. That's not the name that... This is her with the bracket removed. And other features about her that I find interesting is that she's got this line on her forehead above her eyebrows, which is so reminiscent of Pleiadian aliens. They will often have this other line. She's got bigger eyes than normal, kind of Mongolian features, so typical of human-alien hybrids. She has 6 digits, so typical of Pleiadian aliens. See, humanity tends to believe in the idea of evolution. So gray aliens have, 3 fingers and a thumb. Humans have 4 fingers and a thumb. Pleiadians have 5 fingers and a thumb because they're more advanced than we are. In the evolutionary scale, gray aliens just stopped evolving at a certain point because they didn't have to. That's the story of evolution. This is a wax dummy that was made for some kind of, put on a blue screen to retell the story, I guess, for NASA. Now, this woman in the story says that Cheryl Hun, as she calls her, died at some point. But I don't believe she can die, personally. This here's something called the Black Knight. It's been going from the South Pole to the North Pole around the Earth. They know at least 14,000 years. Tesla got messages from this thing way back in 1903. And so our secret space people probably know very well where it's from and who it's to and so on. But apparently they're not sharing that with us either. Planet Serpo. This book came out in 2013. And this is the story of that crash at Roswell, one of the beings was alive. And supposedly they made a deal with these aliens, that they're called heathens, to go back to Planet Circle and exchange 12 of our people with 12 of theirs. 12 of theirs to come here and interact with us, 12 of ours to go there. And after 10 years, he came back, and this is the story of that interaction. Ah, we got our leader. This guy is a politician in the UK. He's like a civil servant. What would you call it? He's not a mayor, but like that level of civil servant politician. His mother worked with the Secret Service for MI5 or 6, translating, typing out secret documents and so on. When he was 6 months old, he remembers this 9-foot-tall, mantis-like creature coming to his crib, picking him up, and looking down at him and saying, "That woman that birthed you is not your mother. I am your mother." And he's had a lifetime of interactions with these mantis creatures. And again, so often, if you are interacting with one of these alien beings, you probably have an incarnation as well. Is that the truth? Last month they were lobotomizing pumpkins, now they're shoving bread up a turkey's back. Planet has issues, Bert. This is the guy who should be president of the United States. No question about it. If you don't believe me, look at the top 100 things he wants to do when he's elected president. He claims that his father worked for the Parsons Company between Los Alamos Labs and the military, designing high-tech equipment. As a 6-year-old child, his father put him through a Nikola Tesla teleportation machine. It's not just aliens that have high tech. We do too. And Tesla was pretty far out. When Tesla died, the War Department and the FBI raced to his apartment. And the War Department got there first, sent all his information back to Los Alamos Labs. Probably a good thing they did. Supposedly there's more PhDs per square foot in Los Alamos than anywhere on the planet. Lots of smart people. They, without knowing what it was, they built these 2 pillars, and when they plugged it in, there was like this wall of energy. One of the technicians dropped a wrench, bent down to pick it up through the wall of energy, and he's gone. They turn it off, and they're, whoa, we killed this guy. And 3 months later, he came back from Africa with just the money in his pocket. Thank God for that exchange rate, right? That's when they realized it was a teleportation machine. And so then they started working on targeting it. Well, how do you do that? You know, because some of these people end up at the bottom of the ocean or on the moon or whatever. So, but if you offer a homeless person $20 to walk through that wall of energy, well, Andrew doesn't know how many. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of homeless people walk through that wall of energy. God only knows where they are now. Some of them got shredded. They found that adults in particular had such strong belief systems that it was much better to use children because children were a lot more open and could teleport more easily. But in the intervening years, they have worked the bugs out of these teleportation machines. Andy Basiago says when he's president, he's going to bring that forward. There's no reason we're not using it today to move around the planet. That's one of the technologies he wants to bring out. He claims to have a great alien incarnation, and that feels right to me. Sure. He's brilliant, got 5 different degrees, even though he's a lawyer, he's a California lawyer. Nobody wants to argue with him because he's so smart. This guy Charles Hall, worked for the atmospheric weather station, and he was looking at a weather station for the near a U.S. military installation on the west side of Area 51, where he claims there's a tall white alien base, and that other people did not like taking the weather readings there because they were so freaked out. As soon as they got close to it, they just felt icky and didn't want to be there. As I said, when a human ego comes face to face with, or even in close proximity to aliens, quite often our resistances come up, we feel icky, afraid, don't understand why.
So because he was a strong Christian, he says, and he knew that Jesus would protect him, he was okay with them. And he even got to interact face to face with the tall whites. He said the tall whites look enough like us that they could put on overcoats and go to Las Vegas and hang out. Here's Charles Hall. This guy did the impossible. What did he do that was impossible? Gary McKinnon. How do you hack a public library? NASA is supposed to be the public arm of space. How can you hack it? You can't. Yet he was charged with that. Supposedly he was charged with the biggest military hack of all time. And the thing that he was charged with was he found evidence of something called Solar Warden, a secret space program. And Solar Warden talked about ship-to-ship transfers and the names of the various ships that don't exist on planet Earth. And that's why he was charged. This guy also mentioned that there's evidence of a secret space program, several of them. This guy, Randy Kramer, worth listening to, claims he was born in a test tube, and that if you want to make a super soldier, you need to go right to the test tube. Don't start with beings that are already born. They can do that, and they have done it. But in his case, he was going right from a test tube, he claims. Spent 17 years on Mars, claims that he was there as a Marine to protect the humans that were working there on the basis, which we have had for quite some time, obviously, since Billy Meyer showed us pictures in 1975. And he claimed that there were two alien races that he ran into on planet Mars during his stay there. One of them was a mantis type that grew their technology, and the other one was a reptilian type. And he said he ended up getting along with both. They're very territorial, but as long as you stay where you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to do, everything was fine. Then his bosses learned that the reptilians had a temple, and they felt there was a piece of high technology in the middle of that temple. So they sent him and 1,000 soldiers into this temple. He said it was huge, like a stadium or something. Him and his 1,000 buds all get in the middle. He said the doors in the stone all around it opened up, and these reptilian creatures poured out, and he said they are really tough. They went around his group like a Cuisinart. When it was all done, there were about 35 of his people left that his bosses teleported out where they wouldn't have done. In his case, he wasn't much more than a head. But he claims that they have technology that's like in The Fifth Element, a bed, and if you put the head in there and there's some electrical activity, it will regrow the whole body in a matter of a couple of hours. So humanity already has this wild high-tech stuff, if we can let ourselves accept that. Sure. One of the things that's going to happen with this secret space program, I say, is humanity is changing how we look at it. We are going to have teleportation. We are going to have these instant healing. And we're going to have 50 years of tried and true by these secret space people as we fill in the gaps of where did this technology go. I'm afraid I'm not going to walk in that thing and get shredded. Well, people have been doing it for 50 years. It's completely safe now. This guy claims that he was abducted by the German group. This guy claims that he was a psychic that they would use in interactions between humans and aliens. And these blue avian aliens have just started to appear in our solar system recently and seem to be linked to the Builder race way back when. And these beings are talking to other alien groups. One of them being, this guy claims that there are at least half a dozen inner Earth breakaway societies over the millions of years that, kind of like that German group with nicer people, have reached an apex in their society, and some calamity happened to the rest of Earth, so they just broke away and have been living. Once you have free energy, once you have replicator machines that can make anything you want, you don't need money. And you can make all this stuff and live in that high-tech Star Trek kind of existence. And that's what these inner Earth societies are doing. And the blue avians have been given the hat saying, you've been telling humanity, the surface dwellers, that you're aliens and you should stop that, and you should be sharing this technology with them and helping them. So
one group in particular, the Agarthons, had an Agarthons Meet Humanity a couple weeks ago or a month ago or so in New York City. Others of their groups are going to do the same thing, apparently. William Tompkins claims that he worked on the Solar Warden program. Oh, and so these other two also claim Solar Warden is the apex of humanity's secret space program. There's all kinds of electrogravitic devices and goes everywhere, like the TR-3D and so on. Tompkins died in his mid-90s, just like a month ago or so. And he has several videos about how he helped build a lot of that Solar Warden secret space program. This woman, Nera Isley, also claims to have been to the backside of the moon, to the base, and suffered a little bit of abuse there, but her story is interesting. She's nice. This guy, in the late 60s, as a teenager, built a rocket that was so fast that when it ignited, it was almost nothing to see because there was a flash of light and it was gone. And it tore a hole in the atmosphere which caused like this cyclone to happen and stuff. And then he landed it in Area 51. And he was taken into like a huge underground car park. And he said when he got in there, the whole car park went down, hundreds of floors. And when they got to a really low level, they went out and he said walked maybe 3/4 of a mile. And they showed him this craft that he couldn't tell whether it was technology or grown, biology. And he went inside it, put his hands in the console wrapped around his hands and told him stuff, claimed it was like billions of years old. And at any rate, this guy built that rocket back in the late 60s when he was a teenager. He's been building a lot better since then. So we're not really hearing the good stuff. This is Kalki, the boss at Witness University. Funny story about this guy. Some Russians like going to Witness University. I was there once and there was a group of Tibetans, like 200 of them. And they claimed that Witness University is the place on the planet for spiritual teaching. Some Russians came there, took his likeness back to a face reader in Russia who didn't know anything about him. And the face reader looked at him and said, does this guy believe that he's God? That is his experience, right? Like Sai Baba operated from here, not here, right? Most of the time. He might have wobbled from time to time. But those kinds of people that are operating here, their experience is that I am the God. Sai Baba used to say the only difference between you and I is that I am cognizant of being God and you're not. You still are, just not cognizant of it. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. So, the conclusion? Oneness University claims that December 21st, 2012, humanity began to wake up. We stepped over the threshold into this new reality, this new earth. All of humanity is awakening to some point. Some of the things that secret space people say that are going to happen is that negative people will go insane. Positive people will get happier and more blissful as we get farther and farther into this new energy. For the first time since we created this reality, we're going back up the chain towards God. We're thinning that veil. According to Kalki, the first time I was there, he wouldn't talk about aliens at all. The second time I went there, like 6 months later, that's all he could talk about. Only human-alien hybrids will survive in this new energy. And you can be a human-alien hybrid if you want to. Anybody can choose that. The Indigo kids and the Peacemaker kids, they're already choosing that. But we can choose it too if we want to. A star-seeder, a wanderer, that's what they call them at Oneness University. The Peacemakers are those awakened beings. So they're going to operate from there, but they're going to allow themselves to be presidents of countries and CEOs of big corporations. Things that the Buddha and the Christ, they didn't do that. Had they done that, those countries would probably be quite different. When those types of people take over, they're called peacemakers because they will end all wars. And a statement that I always make to people is, civilized people don't kill other people. And they don't have to be told that either. They don't do it. Don't kill people. Secret space means that we're going to get exotic technology now, as soon as that trickles down. And as soon as we are ready for it, it will happen. We have to accept it. We have to be ready for it. We have to demand it. Free energy means the end of money. And electrogravitic said free energy, they go hand in hand. And probably that's why humanity has been holding back on the electrogravitics and we're still driving around in cars. Healing rejuvenation machines, teleportation, reverse aging, replicator machines, only one step further than a 3D printer. Can grow anything we want. Become truly civilized. End of suffering, poverty, and hunger. When valiant Thor went to the when he was brought to the Pentagon, they took him underground to a train, and he went to the White House and met the president at the time, Eisenhower. Handed him a 2-inch document that says the U.S. is a very influential country, and if you were to implement the things in this document, you will end hunger, suffering, eventually even death in your country. And because the U.S. is influential, other countries will see what you're doing and they'll follow suit. Eisenhower's people studied it for a year, gave it back to Valiant Thor and said, yeah, it would ruin our economy, we're not doing it. Valiant Thor thought that Richard Nixon was really quick-witted, and Richard Nixon called Valiant Thor and called the out-of-towners. So that is the end of the presentation, and I thank you all for your attention. I don't know how you could stand it. Did anybody have any questions? Or
the fellow that you said you sent me some picture to the Facebook, he's the fellow that runs the Oneness University, and
that's right. People call him an avatar. You know.
He's very awkward.
He is. Yeah.
It's insane.
Yes, that's right. And she's wonderful too. We got to meet her when I was there the last time. She's really happy. You can tell she's just a really loving person. And so is he.
Where is Oneness University?
And near Chennai, in southern India. So they speak with that Tamil accent, which is, it takes you 2 days just to understand a word they're saying. Like in the north, they all speak with that British kind of accent, which is easy to understand. But the Tamil, oh, that's tricky to understand. Yeah, this guy. That's the guy you're talking about?
Yeah.
He said that they asked him, when did he awaken? He said, well, when he was young, there was a university professor who used to come over and debate with his dad. And it's when he realized that everybody wasn't like him, is when he realized that he was an awakened person. He thought everybody would be like him. Yeah.
If the Pleiadians are here to protect us, who are they protecting us from?
They claim that they were protecting us from other aliens that might have a negative impact on humanity at that time. And that once we worked out the math in 2012 of how to target the TR3B into other solar systems out of our own, well then having us under quarantine was kind of a waste of time because we could get out. So that's when the quarantine came off. So interesting that it comes off at the same time that we come into the new age or golden age as it's called.
What do you do for Monroe Institute? How do you say, what do you learn?
It's kind of, what would you say, advanced meditation made easy. They use binaural beats to assist with meditation. And it's really interesting how different people listening to these binaural beats, all listening to a similar tone, will have very similar experiences. And I've never seen a place where you interact with a group of, say, 20 people, and you're all in and out of the same experiences. And, oh, I saw you, and I saw you, and you were going through a door, and, you know. It's interesting how that happens. I'll be talking about that at some point, too, probably.
How about the Lois Cabin situation that she's written about?
Yeah, I find her kind of, she's interesting. Did she die?
Yeah.
Are you talking about Dolores Cannon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting lady, for sure. That kind of interesting.
Have you read Dr. Sallo's books, Ex-Politics?
Certainly listened to lots of interviews with him.
Yeah.
I like him too. I think he's a cool dude. And I think he's trying to keep things straight, whereas some of the people might be less than honest. Try not to talk about them too much.
Can you explain the difference between extraterrestrial and
Interdimensional?
or interdimensional?
So, interdimensionals would be beings like those gray aliens that their DNA times out. They're from Earth, kind of, but not exactly on Earth. And extraterrestrial, to my mind, is a being not from Earth, from some other planet. They might be from a different time and space too, but not originating from Earth. And some of them are really strange to interact with. I find that people who claim to have interactions with aliens probably are that. First time I met Monroe, there's a lawyer. Lawyers never go to Monroe. And she claims that several times when she's had psychic readings, the psychics will go, there's a tall mantis creature standing behind you. Oh, it's your guide. And then they'd relax. And this girl had an energy about her that I liked her, but there was something icky about her. And I don't, because you don't know who it is, I guess it's okay to say. But years later, I met a guy, and he claimed to have interactions with mantis people in his dream times. And I looked at him and went, you could be her brother. They looked exactly the same, like twins or something. Did they really look like that? Or was that just me putting that to his face? But there was something about their energy that was similar, and their looks, in my opinion, they looked exactly like brother and sister. And I hooked them up through emails. I mean, he's married and she's, not that way, but they were both interested in interacting, because it's very rare that you come across people that have much to do with those mantis beings, because they're really odd.
So when you say they feel icky, is that when you're saying like your ego recognized them as being something different than what humans?
Probably.
Okay, so it wasn't that she was icky.
No, I don't think so. No. And she was nice, actually.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was
So would you say that the extraterrestrials that are in human form right now that have volunteered to come?
absolutely lots. And probably most of us, and as we go further into this new energy, most of us are going to start recognizing our alien incarnations. Right now it's happening a lot with the children that are moving in here. But even us that have been here for a while, moved from that old age into the new age. To say that, December 12th, or December 21st of 2012, that's the line. Indigos and Peacemakers have been coming here since 85 at least. I know one of the trainers at Monroe, I said to her, she's older than me, horrible old man. I said, you feel just like an indigo. And she says, that's what the psychics tell me. You were born before 85. But in 1985, she had a near-death experience, and she thinks that she's a different person now.
How did you become interested in this, and when did you become interested in all this?
It's been my whole life. And I remember even as a little kid, like when I saw Betty and Barney Bill story, I was way too young to read that at that time. It was on the front page of the Toronto Star Weekly or something. And I remember that story. It jumped out at me, and
I remember the adults talking about it for sure, you know. So all those kinds of things just seem to. And then, I don't know, I guess our family has had a certain amount of seeing flying saucers and so on.
What do they say about near-death experiences and spiritual experiences and so on with humans?
Well, that gray alien story was that, you know, when they came to ask for DNA, they would have asked not only a between life incarnational state, but people who were having near-death experiences and in comas and deep sleep as well. Is that what you were asking? Or?
I don't know. I don't know if there was anything there at all.
The Monroe Institute just started a near-death experience class. Like they've had Lifeline for years, which is going into the between life incarnational state and rescuing the people in the various heavens and hells and so on. And they just started having a near-death experience in hells and so on. And they just started having a near-death experience, which is to try and hook us up with the tunnel, the various, you know, there's several things that happen with a near-death. Quite often people will experience leaving their body, going through a tunnel, going to the light. And this near-death experience class is by a professor from Minnesota who had a near-death experience when he was sitting with a friend who died. And he saw these beings come down and from the light and grab this person, and he went with them back up to the light and had this near-death experience, even though he hadn't had, you know, any kind of trauma. He thought he was the only one. One of the other people later on he talked to at that same city also went on that trip. He found out later on. And then he started designing this near-death experience class for Monroe. Monroe has all kinds of interesting classes. You'd love it there. Have you been? Have you been? Oh.
I read a book on by an engineer current at Monroe Institute, and told his story. What kind of thing I had to call
Oh, Paul Elder's Eyes of an Angel. Yeah, Paul's a very interesting dude, for sure. And if you ever get a chance to take his remote viewing course, I highly recommend it. He also has Monroe North. So in Victoria, if a person wants to go and take that week-long course, they can do it. That's where my son and I just were, was at the one in Victoria, take the near-death experience class. And Paul is a good teacher, very interesting dude. If you get a chance to take his remote viewing class, it's awesome too. And Victoria's nice. And it's in Canada, so we don't have to go through all that BS at the border. So I'll take that. I saw pictures of his house and it was awesome. Well, you can go have coffee or tea or cookie or something. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you.